Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Good morning, sorry. Nods? No, yes? Okay. Well, it's just, I was in the back, and it was really difficult to hear the comments, the echoes and such, so I want to make sure that we're clear, you can hear clearly. I'm Roland Bellerose. I'm from Alberta, Paul Nation, Francine, Whiteduck, Kitigan-Zibi. We have something we'd like to offer you today that really is, I think, the crown that will help us move forward with this issue that we face today on how we can finally become economically viable in our own right and build our own economies in Canada with our communities. So how do we do that? Well, we hope to be able to share with you today some real facts and some real figures from a consortium perspective on where the industry sits today. And the type of information that a consortium can provide to you and help you with is to sort out where these opportunities are. So we started this because we believe that the leadership starts with the people. Leadership starts with us taking the risk and taking those steps forward, as you have all come here today to try to figure out what you would like to do or how you would like to get involved in the economics of cannabis or hemp. This consortium is a 100% Indigenous-led endeavor. What that really means is that you, the people, create the consortium, not us. We're just helping lead it. We're helping create it. We're helping design it. And so we need you to work with us to build this capacity. First time in history. Never before in Canada since the European contact have we ever come across something in this country that would allow us to find common ground and unite. The plant, the medicinal plant, the medicinal qualities of the plants that we grow, hemp and cannabis, is that common ground that we can share right across this country, no matter what community, no matter what size, no matter where you're from. This is the first time in history that no industry has been set before we have an opportunity to get involved. Yes, there are advances. Yes, we are behind the 8 ball. Yes, there are jurisdictional issues. But from an economic perspective, there are things we can do as a value proposition to change that environment, to really be able to take hold of the opportunity in a way that the Indigenous community has done things in the past. Stewards of the land, cultivation, food as medicine, medicine as food, etc. We'd like to call it the red market. So what exists today? The black market, that's existed. The gray market, we're talking about it now. The federal provincial jurisdiction of the regulatory regime. But what about our market, the red market, the market that we can create, the brand that we can build to sell around the world, the Indigenous brand? And why we're here today asking for your support is that if we want to build a system, an ecosystem, a value chain that can supply and meet demand, we need to do this in a vertical environment. And it all starts with data. It all starts with us being able to understand where the opportunities are, what's happened, and what we need to do to build that system. Navigating the regulations, as has been the topic of discussion in this conference, and it dominates every conversation everywhere in this country. It doesn't matter what it is. and it will get sorted out. I'll let Francine take over from here.
Kwe, Anish Pamadizin, Wabapinesh Question Indigenous Cause, and I would like to welcome everybody to our territory, Algonquin territory. So today I'm going to just give a little background on some of the lay of the land. I'm going to cover these areas here. We're going to try to just to get an understanding of and situate ourselves and where we are. So to do that, just kind of, read a bunch of literature, looked at what are the trends in 2019, and this is what the literature is saying. All those weed newsletters out there, investment letters that I read almost every morning, and different sources. This is some of the things they're saying. So they're saying that the legalized market cannibalized the market share of the illicit market at 76%. So they're saying the illicit market, whatever that may be, is about 24%. I don't know how accurate those figures are, and I don't know how you measure that, really, but that's the number you see floating around out there. The other trend we're seeing is that the industry, of course, is moving really fast, and we're now beyond early stage products, which are the dried cannabis and flowers, the growing of them, to more value-added products with a variety of uses and formats. So we're moving up that value chain, and the established cannabis companies are seeking products with higher margins. That's where the smart money's moving to. There's a lot of consolidation going on in the marketplace, as we see, and we're seeing some of the big players emerge. There's also, not only here in Canada, deregulation happening, but certainly we're being watched around the world. We're one of the first jurisdictions globally to, other than Uruguay, I believe, that is deregulating the cannabis and hemp sector. And it's happening very quickly. Europe's already looking at the market because they see the worth of that market. And so they're coming on stream looking at that. So that means there's going to be competition happening. If we think 5 years down the line, it's going to be a very, very different place. So we need to start thinking about how do we play out in this and create our brand in a market that's moving very quickly, consolidating quickly, and where market share is really being taken up for those early players. So when we talk about cannabis, and this is what I'm seeing here, and I didn't realize this, once I started researching how people are talking about, they're talking about really 3 areas that they, touching the plant, which includes biotechnology, a lot of investment going into there, cultivation and retail. What is being said about cultivation and retail is it's a race to the bottom. It's happening in so many places, so many producers, that it's going to quickly get very crowded. Hemp production, of course, a lot of promise with hemp. The United States just took hemp off at a Schedule I. We have some huge opportunities that are going to happen just on the New York border with us. Some huge investments being made in that area. They haven't announced the place yet, but they're looking in there. And then marijuana products. We got ag tech. Of course, real estate is the one that really gives Indigenous people an advantage because we have that. Secondary services and an ancillary service, investing in finance, tech and media, consumption devices, that kind of thing. So that's the way, that's kind of the language they're talking in when you're beginning to look at how people are investing. Now, this graphic here kind of is the pie chart of how things have moved along. And when it was produced, and it's produced by Canaccord Genuity Capital, when it was produced, it was a prediction of what's going to be happening by 2021. Well, we know this is already wrong, so if you, not wrong, but needs to be updated. So if you look at the market share, we see some of the bigger players here that have consolidated. We see Aurora, we see Tilray, Weed, Afria, some of the bigger players that are in the market space right now. Cannabis growth is not in there. That's how much consolidation has happened. So take off out of, so if you look at other, that's probably where we lie. And if you look at that other space at 41% of that market space, you add to that Canopy, which probably has, I would guess from what I read, 12 or 13% of the market, if not more. You know, that brings it down to 30% market share. And if you add in there what they're referring to as that illicit market, which, by the way, we may be part of that because they haven't defined Indigenous production in any kind of way other than not within the framework. So there's 24%. So that leaves a very small pie happening in terms of the market share that we're seeing right now in the production activity. So if you look at some of the regional breakdown, everybody's grabbed a piece of the country. Green Organic Dutchman's taken over Quebec. There's a bigger part to this. There's one in New Brunswick. Or Granigram Holdings should be there for, we can't see it, for New Brunswick. Ontario, you've got Afria, you've got Tilray. I wasn't sure about Saskatchewan. I didn't find any companies based there. And then Alberta and BC, their production capacity. Now, I just heard that they were saying they were going to stop issuing license at 100 metric tons? 100 tons? I'm just curious about that one, because when I went to Tilray's site, it states that they're now producing 51 metric tons. So, you know, we got to do some work here. And the other things, so if you look at the square footage, take Canopy Growth BC, in BC, for instance. I was watching TV where they were talking about their 2.4 million square footage facility and how big, and they were trying, and not Canopy, but another, you know, they were talking about in terms of millions of square footage and why people should invest in those companies. When I actually went out and converted that to acres, that 2.4 million square footage is 55 acres. And you know, but we're hearing these huge numbers, and it makes us think a certain way about, you know, we can never compete with that. When indeed we have those resources and those assets to work with. So we really need to start thinking about, in terms of, we want Indigenous people to have this much acreage of production. Let's start talking about that kind of conversation and negotiating and moving towards obtaining that kind of participation in our market share. This is the hemp production. This is the 2017 data that I could find. It's not up to 2018. And another interesting thing about data, because I was talking with some young people in Quebec who wanted to grow a hemp. And as we tried to find out data and spoke to people, they said, well, Quebec's not really a big player, you really shouldn't, you know. We were very discouraged about participating in that industry because they were saying, well, it's all happening out west, et cetera. When you actually went get the numbers, Quebec's all at 286 licenses. So there's something happening in Quebec, but because of the data that we're getting or the information that people telling us is not accurate, we're actually making decisions on that. So looking at a role for a consortium or some kind of place where we can get accurate data helps us make different decisions. And it also helps us to consolidate our efforts and to really know and understand that market share that we want to go into. I also talked to one of the persons that runs the National Network of Colleges. He sent me the list of where training is going on in these institutions across Canada, and they're looking to work and partner with Indigenous communities in a significant way to say, you know, how do we help? If it's certification, if it's qualifications, what do you need? And who do we go with to start the conversation? What does that sector look like? So when we start, you know, these are the people and the institutions and organizations that the consortium is looking to bring together and start talking about this. So today, how many youth are there in here? And let's define youth as under 30. Lift up your hands. Okay. There's a table at the back. I know that because what we did when this conference was being planned, this is all going to happen with youth. They drive that marketplace in a big way. We talked to Indigenous Services, and they provided some sponsorship to get some youth here. And here's the problem that they're running into. And some of them are sitting at the back here. You know, one of them, Mitigoman Agriculture, is a tea company. It produces organic teas, but the whole farm that this Kayoki young fella has created is all based on pollination ideas of creating a farm that attracts bees and birds and butterflies and all those little creatures that pollinate and address some of those in his own way is the environmental issue and the climate issues that we're facing. So how do we bring that kind of thinking to the cannabis industry and throughout all the production? Other youth are feeling, we have some tree planters from our community, and if you add up the little gang I work with, they've planted over, 5 million trees, if not more. One of them sitting here planted 1 million on his own. That's a lot of little trees. They're aware of what's happening in the saplings, where you plant the seeds to grow into saplings. The greenhouses, well, those greenhouses right now are being taken up, that space, very much by the cannabis sector. So there's a whole lot of opportunity that has opened up in that space. I've been hearing about that. We have another fella and his partner from our community went to the band council, made an excellent presentation to them, did their homework, has done the work because they want to start a cannabis business in the community. The community said, no, we're not ready. We're not going there, and gave them a lot of reasons not to do something. Now, these are young people. Why do they have to sort out a systemic issue of 100 years that we haven't been able to solve in order to participate in an economy? These are the questions we need to start working on. What space can we make for them? They can't solve the community's debate. They don't want to solve the community's debate, otherwise I guess they'd be running for council. But yet they are business people that want to go into that direction. So we need to find a way to engage that youth sector in the things they want to do, because there's going to be a lot of innovation coming from that. And so an ecosystem approach. Last year, I was on a committee for the Social Innovation, Social Finance group, and what they were doing was basically looking at a whole new way of doing business in Canada around social enterprises. So we worked on this committee, and one of the things we did was we listened to more than 1,000 people across the country, and one of my colleagues is Brenda Zerba over there, I just noticed, was actually serving on that committee with us. We listened to 1,000 presentations or more. We held our own sessions with Indigenous people, and in the fall, after all our work, we said, this has not been done before, or it's just happening in a small kind of way. How do you create a whole ecosystem to engage Canada in that? And we ended up defining 6 areas, and in the fall, they announced an $800 million investment to create that ecosystem. So based on the work that we did, we said, well, this, if it worked there, why not work it in an ecosystem that we're trying to build? So we borrowed from that, and Brenda, you'll recognize these, the 6 areas that our consultations with thousands of people said, you have to look at these areas if you want to create a new ecosystem. And that's what you want to talk about now.
Thank you, Francine. So here we are, the word regulatory. We need to come up with new models. I believe that as a consortium working with the people, we can come up with new models and the new laws that we need to implement for ourselves. I think that's the issue here, is where the responsibility lies is in our leadership, in our people, in our communities, to come up with these new models. Right now, there's 6 licenses pending in Health Canada. 6 licenses provided, 30 pending. You just heard the number, 100,000 tons. Once that number's been hit, no more licenses. So is this a race to the bottom or a race to the top to be cultivators? Or is there another way we can look at getting into business? And this is the kind of data that we really need to understand so that we don't find ourselves with boat anchors on our nations. Procurement is one solution. Set-asides, the supply chain. We've all heard Canada has a short supply right now and is not able to meet the demand of cannabis. And yet we have enormous amounts of stock in our communities right now with supply. Why is there not the discussion with the feds and the provinces to meet that supply and demand? Another role the consortium can play. Consolidation. We know that this is part of a new ecosystem environment. If you don't consolidate, if you're unable, and you're too small, you're a crafter, and you can't get in the game, and the barriers are too high, and the barriers are too expensive, how can you participate in this economy? Again, that's something that we can help with. Right. I'm going back. Total pharmacy expenditures. All prescriptions in Canada, $500 million. Yeah, in Indigenous communities. This is where we can make a huge, huge gain by participating in this component. Research and development, let's face it, the plants have been a part of our communities for as long as anyone has ever known. It is medicine, it is food. It's not pharmaceutical. It is food, it is natural medicine. And we wish to try to retain that in some holistic healing fashion. We wish to drive that forward. We wish to participate and develop that as part of the whole ecosystem. Clinical trials. Well, why can't nations participate in clinical trials? Because, quite frankly, they have the knowledge and the skills to understand what this plant does. And combining the expertise of the institutions with our nations only makes it better. Finance and capital, let's face it, this has been the biggest problem we always face. Late to the game, and the big investors want to go public on the stock exchange, and then we're left with what kind of financing to be able to grow our businesses. Again, the barriers. I heard just yesterday from somebody that it costs up to $1 million to get a license. What a barrier is that? What kind of a barrier is that for a small community that barely has one person in their economic development office to go out and get $1 million so they can get a license to do something. Again, these are things that we can help with. This is all part of what an ecosystem requires in order for us to build. Capacity development, we heard about it a little bit today. Where's the training of the future? How are we going to, what are we going to train our people in? What areas are we going to train them in? When are they going to get trained? What's the quality and standards that are going to be a part of that? Again, an ecosystem can help with that. The consortium can help with that. And mobilization and awareness. There has been no awareness. Right now we have in our communities a great many leaders with misinformation or myth information or a lack of understanding of what the cannabis plant can do from a medical perspective. The fear that exists in our communities from the perspective of addictions and creating the safe environments for our kids. The awareness that needs to be brought about what the real opportunities are and how we can move forward as a holistic group, uniting together, creating that buying power we need to create the world brand that we can sell around the world. And that is really the value proposition, is that if you take 200, 300, 400 communities and they all have their own brand, we can brand that as the national Indigenous brand to sell that around the world as true medicinal quality food and medicine. Thank you.
Just to let you know, one of the things we're doing today is we have a table at the back, and we're not signing up people, but certainly we want to have your name, and we want to be able to be very transparent about who we are. So we have a sign-up sheet for you to really indicate that you want to receive some information, and that we include you in a list, because I think right now we're still trying to identify each other. And if we just create this list, there's no requirements to be a member or anything, but that we have your permission to put your name on our organization on a list as we create this discussion. And later on today, we're going to be holding a workshop on this. And so just to end, really the core of our existence in our communities, since we're small, we're taught about a plant culture. Even before we can walk, we're out on the land for many of us. And we have this ancient culture with all kind of proven and excellent practices to share with the world. So as a consortium, how do we bring people together to really make that mark in the marketplace as a brand? And in this moment of reconciliation, you heard the discussion this morning. We need to reconcile that we were years before this other system existed. We were productive. We had quality control. We had all these existing systems, and why haven't we made any room for it either in the Cannabis Act, and what can we do right now to make sure that it is recognized? And that should be a real part of reconciliation, and including working with those young people who are trying to participate in this. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, and I wish you a good conference and hope to see you at the booth today as well as in the session later on today. Miigwech.
Thank you, Roland.